Welcome back to Verticals, everyone. We've got a great episode for you here today. We will be bringing on Kyle Norton. Kyle is the CRO of Owner, a monster in the restaurant space I'm sure you've all heard of. He's going to be sharing with us a little bit on his background, why he joined Owner really at the earliest stages as a sales leader, what matters about vertical sales talent, and how AI is transforming his role as a revenue leader. We're really excited for that one and hope everyone can stick around to get his framework on AI-driven sales leadership. But before we dive into that, why don't we hit this week's Vertical Pulse? And Luke, I know you have a meaty one to kick us off.
Awesome. I love it. Good to see everybody. Good to hear everybody. Nick, good to be back with you as always. Super excited for Kyle.
Likewise.
Today's episode's all about go-to-market. Kyle's the CRO at Owner, so we wanted to go deep on this. So I figured I'd pull out an interesting topic that I just wrote on this exact thing. Nick, I wanted to see what go-to-market motions, successful VSaaS companies, and what I mean by successful, I'm basically defining as publicly traded ones or really high-flying privates. What did they start as and what have they evolved into? And how did the ACV actually shape this, as well as how does the founder's background shape this? Because it's not, I think people just say, oh yeah, Owner does inside sales or, X company does outside sales. I wanted to go deeper because it evolves, it changes, it moves around. And so I tried to look at this. So just table setting for how I thought about this and how I think most people think about, different GTM motions. You have outside sales, right? High touch, in person, high ACVs. You have inside sales, cold calling, cold emailing, cold outreach on social, typically lower ACVs. You have marketing led, where if you can crack marketing led, like more power to you. You put $1 in the Facebook machine or the LinkedIn machine and you get $2 out. Partnership led, product led. So those were like the buckets I looked at. And then I went through each company. And so, Palantir, for example, obviously, massive business. Like the multiples that Palantir commands are the highest in the entire software ecosystem, let alone vertical software ecosystem, and massive government contracts, right? And huge commercial contracts, like $1 million to $10 million types of contracts. You can imagine this is very much an outside sales motion, and it basically always has been.
I think their ACVs might even be much higher than that. I think they may be closer to 5 million.
That's so wild
at this point. Yeah.
That's so wild. So I like one of the key takeaways here is if you're running an outside sales motion and you want to build a very sizable company, it's clear that you have to have a massive ACV, like 100K, 200K probably doesn't even cut it to support a 12 to 18 month sales cycle, assuming you want to build a monster like Palantir. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as we'll talk about with Kyle in a moment.
Yeah. Some other interesting ones. So Weave, a lot of people don't know about Weave, but Weave has really done well in the dental space. They're trying to brand themselves more as for SMBs now, but their focus initially and really today still is majority dental. Huge inside sales machine, out of Utah, dialing for dollars. Probably similar approach to Owner that we're going to hear about today.
Yep.
So anyways, I'll link the piece, but I think it's helpful for folks to go read this, go check it out. I basically dissected every company and looked at how ACV dictates the motion. The graph I'm illustrating here is obviously outside sales, higher ACV, product led, and it goes all the way down to product led with lower rates. And the most interesting takeaway is if founders' backgrounds influence go-to-market motion, which I thought it would, and the spoiler is it doesn't. Kind of interesting.
Interesting. This is a really, really cool piece. Everyone should check it out because I think there's just a lot of misconceptions around, hey, this works, this doesn't. The reality is if you look at startups or public companies, you've got everything from 5 million ACVs that have IPO'd all the way down to $500 with LegalZoom and I think Autodesk, and you have a few of them here. So everything can work, but, can't go high ACV inside sales, right? Everything's got to align. So I love this research you put in here, Luke.
Awesome. Well, I'll pass it to you for the next pulse.
Yeah. So we have a good strategy piece there. I thought I would introduce you to relatively recent, financing announcements, startups that are pretty interesting and I think say something about the current state of vertical AI. So, one is Brainco. Listeners, you may have seen this one, but Brainco raised a $30 million Series A. It was led by Elad Gil, and like a true laundry list of angels. I think there's like Reid Hoffman, Sarah Guo, Brian Armstrong, et cetera, et cetera. So flashy one. I don't know. I think they raised maybe 5 before. So is this a seed, a Series A? Who knows? I think what's interesting about it, well, first, let's just say what they do. So it's kind of a AI infrastructure and app builder focused on kind of really meaty, hairy problems with big institutions. So they call out governments, healthcare, energy, I think financial services. There's a bit of a twist. So in a way, it kind of feels a bit like Palantir 2.0, but focused on AI with maybe some other verticals thrown in there. What they really do call out, which I think is maybe an interesting window into what they're trying to do here, is that they're building quote unquote living AI apps that kind of upgrade with new model capabilities. The reality is, if you're just using a foundation model, that can be any application, right? You just switch the model. But I think what they're really speaking to here is the enterprise need right now for solutions that are tailored to them and that don't require them to kind of sort through the bin of 1,000 tools, help with implementation, right? Like we talked a bit about this in the last episode. There's kind of mixed feedback on AI adoption, but I don't think that's because of the promise of it. I think that's because of the difficulty of it and the chaos of the current environment. So I thought this was interesting. It does feel a little bit like a Palantir play. And, I don't know. It's very interesting to me to have a startup like this tackling very complex workflows across something as disparate as healthcare and energy, for example. Luke, how does Brainco strike you?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm just kind of clicking through the website here. It agreed on the Palantir piece. I think it doesn't feel like, it's obviously not SaaS. They're kind of taking an approach of, hey, we're going to get world-class talent and go help solve, very difficult problems at giant enterprises. They're advertising Fortune 2000. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It looks like the founder CEO previously was a founder at Open Store. So obviously bringing some serious talent to the table. Will be cool to see how they do.
Yeah, we'll be watching that one. And I think maybe an interesting thread to drop for startup founders around, you need to have extra care around implementation and service with enterprise-oriented AI solutions. So let's keep an eye on it. One more I'll just layer on. So Doctronic is a business in the healthcare space that raised a $20 million Series A. That was led by Lightspeed, but you've also got Union Square in there, and I think Tusk did their seed. They position themselves as a 24/7 AI, quote unquote, digital doctor covering triage, diagnosis, treatment. What's interesting about it is, if you just go to their website, so you can actually type in, hey, what's going on, and we'll help you get to a doctor, right? So in a way, kind of a ZocDoc, AI-enabled ZocDoc sort of wedge. But if you poke around on their site, what you'll see is really what they're going after is being that system of record of your healthcare data. And they actually even speak about, replacing or serving that EHR function. So I think this one stood out to me, one, in contrast to Brainco, right? They're certainly going after a defined vertical, although maybe not as highly verticalized as some of the EHR plays that we see today. But I also thought it was interesting because you're seeing this across some vertical AI businesses. There's a bit of a B2B, B2C blend, right? You've got kind of leveraging what LLMs can do well to capture consumer interest and get the data. And long term, I think they really want to go more B2B and capture the EMR of the future opportunity. Luke, how'd your Doctronic consult go here?
Well, I accidentally said I was a 22-year-old woman, so I hope nobody, I hope I don't get in trouble for that. I think it's an interesting notion that, hey, let's make the kind of quote unquote GPT the front door and then route people to doctors through that. That seems like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know about you. I've never had a good experience with like the ZocDocs of the world.
Yeah.
Healthcare is so freaking messy and there's so much improvement that needs to be had. And so look, if anybody that's tackling that problem, I'm supportive of.
Totally. And, look, I think I want to give credit to what Cyrus built at ZocDoc. I mean, amazing company. And I know they're innovating too. But the reality is, I think we're seeing a ton of companies go after this new opportunity around where is consumer healthcare data going to live? Because I think we can probably all agree that the current status of I've got some stuff in my chart and some labs I can't even get from my doctor. And, it's a terrible consumer experience, and it probably harms, treatment. So it's an exciting one, and another to keep an eye on.
Awesome. Love it. Well, we got a quick pulse today because our legendary guest is already here. So we'll welcome Kyle to the room.
Bring him in.
All right. This week's Vertical Titan, Kyle Norton. He's the CRO of Owner.com. I bet most listeners here know about Owner. It's high-flying, killer vertical software business. We're going to hear about Kyle, his journey a little bit, but really try to dive in on some playbooks, what he's deployed, what's worked, so that listeners can try to learn from, his success, but I'm sure there's a bunch of failure in there too. So excited to dig in with you. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, appreciate the invite. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, let's start, if you don't mind. Why don't we do a quick kind of summation of the career arc? Like, what got you here? What was the lead up? And then we'll look forward after that.
Yeah. Like many people, I just fell into sales randomly and found myself in like a boiler room environment for the first 4 years of my career, like pure cold call environment, selling like crappy conferences and events, but definitely got the taste of sales, knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do revenue. And so it was in 2008. So we fired like 40% of the company. We were building back up. And so I found myself in a manager's seat like 14 months into my career, and I've been building and rebuilding go-to-market teams ever since. So spent about a decade now or I guess a little over in SaaS. Was a VP of sales for a company called League that was like 0 to 25 million ARR in the enterprise benefits and healthcare space. Then I spent 3 years at Shopify. I ran go-to-market for our point of sale group, and then we reorged, and I ran go-to-market for the Canadian market across all products, all segments, and had an amazing 3 years there. Like, did not want to leave, wasn't planning on leaving Shopify. Felt like I was going to do that for quite a few more years, but through GTM Fund, invested in Owner, got to know Adam, the founder. He put the Adam tractor beam on me and pulled me into the business when it was still very small, like two and change million ARR, 30 people basically. Even though I said I would never go back that early stage because I just had my second kid, the timing was horrible to actually join a startup. But knew that there was something special, knew that Adam had some special founder magic because, I've like done enough angel and advisory and what have you to develop some pattern recognition, and felt really confident in him. And that was like 3.5 years later. We went 2 to 50 in like just over 3 years. And we're continuing to grow at like a almost 2.5x year over year rate, even at this ARR. So having a blast. My team is like sales partnerships, new customer onboarding, RevOps, enablement. I had growth marketing for a while, but we just hired a new incredible CMO who's consolidated the marketing function. I had CS for a little while, so done a little bit of everything.
So before we dive into the details, I just want to zoom back to something that you said, Kyle. What were those patterns that you saw in Adam, and what gave you conviction to join at an earlier stage than maybe you were planning?
Yeah, so I think about writing checks or doing advisory the same way as everybody. It's like it's team, product, market. My philosophy is very, very founder driven. Obviously, angel is in sort of pre-seed, maybe some seed. So you're really just betting on people. And so I have a founder framework. So basically, like 1, are they a force of nature? 2, are they a supercomputer? 3, is there some specific founder market fit? Like, is there a reason that they should win this market? And 4, do they have enough humility not to blow it all up? Because the Venn diagram of like insane force of nature, which is like drive, charisma, like psychotic passion to solve a specific problem, and like I'm one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. That Venn diagram doesn't also overlap with the like humble Venn diagram all that much. You tend to be wired in a very particular way, and like I see companies at Series B or it's a certain like employee count size where things start to fray. You hire senior leaders, but you can't let them make decisions. You are in a company building stage that is like very, very different, and yet you don't really look for advice from the outside. You have a hard time hearing difficult feedback from your board. And you see a bunch of these companies just like run themselves off a cliff at Series B. And it's a pattern that I've seen a bunch. And I think a lot of it, this is certainly not all of it, but a lot of it is founders don't have enough humility to continue to be like very curious and inquisitive and let their teams own things. Because as a founder, you can go founder mode hardcore all the way through Series B and basically let no major decision be made without you. That's like actually not unsustainable, but it's very much unsustainable at Series B. And so you hire senior people and then they quit because they're frustrated from you, or you're like jettisoning yourself into things that you don't have full context on. And sometimes the decision making is not great. And so you need enough founder mode and enough, because like Adam does a lot of founder mode stuff that I'm like, ooh, I don't know, like that seems like an early bet, or that like I might not see it. And he's been right on a ton of them. And you gotta, as an executive, know like when to fully embrace. It's like, he's the founder, he gets the customer more than any of us, and I might not totally see it, but he does. So like, I'm all in on this decision. You need a balance of that back and forth. And I think Adam, like,
disagree but commit kind of framework, right?
Yeah. I'm like, I wouldn't even say disagree but commit, but it's like, I don't totally see it. I'm not sure if I would have made that same call, but I'm actually agreeing because, like I have a lot of faith in Adam. I have a lot of faith in his ability to think farther in the future than maybe is my aperture, and have a more intuitive understanding of the customer than I do, given how much time he spent. And so I saw a bunch of this even when he was like, I think I met him when he was 22. And that's when I would have started working with him. And I saw enough of these signs that I'm like, man, if I don't do this, I might like regret it for the rest of my life. And, this is why we do these things. Like, we want to be in a power law outcome situation. And I felt like he could do it. And I've been thus far proven right. And I continue to be more bullish and optimistic and confident in that trajectory today than I ever have been.
I have a funny Adam story. So Adam reached out. I think I can't remember when he got the Teal Fellowship. I don't know if he was like 18 or 7. He was so young. He started this thing when he was like 17, right? He wasn't even out of high school yet. Yeah. So I remember him reaching out and setting up a Zoom with me because I had previously done the fellowship, and I get on this call and you could see it. I could see what I can't say I saw it to the level that you did, but he was maniacal. Like, he's reaching out to all these people. I'm getting on the phone and he's like, 17 years old, and he's like, I'm going to take over a restaurant. I'm sitting there. I'm like, dude, there's toast. Like, I don't know if that's the right vertical. Like, are you sure? And he was just, he had this like look in his eye, and I had never even met him. He just like reached out to do a Zoom, and wow, but you could tell like he was going to run through walls, until he couldn't anymore.
Yeah.
What was his kind of founder market fit angle? I forget.
He started the business for his mom, basically. His mom had a dog grooming salon. They put all of their life savings and more, because they were leveraged, into this dog grooming business. And it was basically like going under, and it was going to take their house, and his mom was in a really bad like personal situation. He's talked about this publicly. And I would encourage everybody to go like listen to that story on, I think Jack Altman's podcast was when he really got into it. And so he built this gaming studio. So his whole thing was, he ran the second biggest Minecraft server in the world when he was like 14 or something like that. And like, I've never played Minecraft, but I like did some research, and I'm like, well, this is a real achievement. And then he had a gaming studio, and eventually was like, he applied the skills he learned in marketing those Minecraft servers and games to his mom's business, saved the business. It's now this like amazing, thriving thing. And he just saw like the impact that it has on his mom, had on his mom. And she had like a new lease on life, like transformed as a person, because they went from like scared of losing their house to now she's living her purpose. She's like fulfilled and, you know, confident in herself. And he just like on a dime was like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to do games that waste kids' time. I want to help entrepreneurs. And then, was like, well, how can I do this for the most people possible? And so he picked restaurants because it's a really big market. And so he just like is bonded to this mission. And if you hear him talk to customers, you see it. This is like a bit of that force of nature thing. And it just like, it jumped out of the screen at me. And, cause the first call I did was a call at the end of the GTM fund evaluation. And it was funny, Scott Barker at the time, he was like, cause this is Shopify for restaurants. I was at Shopify at the time, and Scott was like, this is not a diligence call. He's like, we want in, this is a sales call. Like, you need to convince this guy that you're awesome, and he wants to like have access to you as an LP in GTM fund. But, you know, so I got onto this call, and he just started like ripping questions at me, and like not basics, like really insightful, precise, well thought through questions. And he had a bunch of them. And I was just like asking for context as we went. And it just like leapt off the page that, the founder market fit, the force of nature, like psychotic drive,
humility too, big humility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was like, he like really wanted to know, really wanted to learn from me, really wanted to hear like my insights. And then I suggested a book, because we were talking about messaging. So I suggested Made to Stick, which is one of my favorite books on the topic. And, he's like, okay, great. I'll take a look at that. And then normally I suggest a book and a founder like, you know, probably doesn't read it or whatever. 18 hours later, he sends me a text message. He's like, hey, I read that book. And he had all of these questions. I was like, man, these aren't like beginner questions. These are like, this guy read this book in literally a day, like a day and a half, or actually like 3/4 of a day, and then was ripping these questions at me. And I was like, whoa, like I got onto the next call, and it was the first time like I'm not some Teal Fellow Mensa, member, but like I'm a reasonably smart person. And it was the first time that I'd been around somebody, or one of the rare times where I was like, man, it's like, I feel sort of intellectually self-conscious around this guy who's 22 years old. And I was like 36 at the time or whatever. And, I just knew. And I have this moment, I've had this moment with like, not to this degree, but I have a very new, like for writing checks or for doing advisory, I have like a very different bar. Now it's this like atom bar. People won't get there, like, or else I'll never write a check, ever. But I've only met like one or two founders that I'm like, they're a tier below but are at my new like post-atom standard.
Yep. So Kyle, you mentioned founder market fit. I wanted to chat about seller market fit. So, you know, maybe a good entree to that would be, as you were considering owner, to what extent did your experience in Shopify factor in? How much has that been helpful? And just what's your overall view on the importance or not of seller market fit?
Yeah. And then really the question is like revenue leader market fit. And I think we should talk about both of these things, because I'm sure you got a bunch of listeners that are thinking about how to hire sellers as well. Yeah, I think in VSaaS, especially in vertical SaaS and in VSMB, in very small SMB, which a lot of VSaaS lives in, it does take a very particular type of revenue leader that is a systems thinker. Like, that's the biggest differentiator. You can be super successful as an enterprise leader without being like Mr. Dashboards and know how to like tweak every part of your revenue system and be like super duper data literate. You can be an awesome deal jockey and know how to recruit great people and tell a good story and run a good pipeline review meeting. Like, there's a rigor and an operational thoroughness that's certainly required there. But I think in vertical SaaS, you really need to be somebody who loves the data, loves the numbers, loves to tweak and think a lot like a growth marketer. We hired a new CMO who is a growth person by background. And I think the reason that him and I get along so well and have like built a very collaborative and relationship so quickly is you just see the world through the data. And a lot of sales leaders don't come with that. And so if you're a founder looking for that, for that leader, like the operational rigor and the data centricity is much more important than the sales acumen, because the sales acumen is important, and you need to be able to teach great craft to win deals at a high level, but you really need to understand how the machine works. And that's always been my gig. That's always been like my calling card. That has been my competitive advantage in my sales leadership career, was like solving for the machine and understanding like, okay, this is just like volume times conversion rate equals output. And it's a manufacturing line of that. And so you just break it all down. You solve problems stage by stage. And like, that's how you build a.
Kyle's being humble here though, because Kyle, we've had calls before. And when he says his value prop is understanding the machine, he's like the most maniacal. Like I left a call with you, Kyle, where I had already sold my business, and I was sitting there thinking like, I did go to market wrong for the last 10 years. Like we were an enterprise shop, and I was trying to find like the enterprise sales leader, and it was all about like, all right, let's map the accounts and map all the people and go after them. And that's great. But like your approach, and I'm hoping we can get into it a little bit even in the weeds for people, because your approach is like so systems and tools and data and like thinking very far outside the box that like 99.9% of folks don't even think about. They're like, how many emails did we send today? Like how many calls? It's you. Like, can you walk us through that at all? Like when you just break down to maybe a couple levels deeper on like what you mean by the system, because it's insane from what I've pulled out in past conversations.
Well, thank you for saying that. Appreciate it. So I think Winning by Design has really good frameworks for this. I think they're the best sort of thought leadership out there. And they call it the revenue factory. I've been calling it the manufacturing line, but now I'm adopting their revenue factory language because it sounds cooler. And essentially, you can take your entire funnel and break it down stage by stage in big stages like lead and then opportunity and then close one. But but more importantly, you can break it down into micro stages. And so like a good example is how we run our monthly business review. We go through every step of that customer journey, and it all has to be instrumented. So one of the things I do different is I invest very heavily in RevOps data and enablement so that we can build the right foundations, capture the right data across the customer journey. And then you have to go through and be methodical about, one is just like building the understanding. So that's step one. Can you actually know what's happening across this funnel? Are you capturing data throughout the journey from your call transcripts? So we use Momentum, which is this AI tool that transforms call transcripts and fills in your CRM for you. Do you have good automations that show you when meetings have been booked and then completed, or booked and rescheduled, or booked and not completed? Do you have good sentiment and disposition infrastructure? So when people call and they say that person didn't pick up, do you have an easy way for them to say connected or not connected, gatekeeper, decision maker, and then the outcomes that waterfall below it? And so do you have, and it's all about the boring work. I think like this is probably one of the like macro lessons is like, I really enjoy that stuff. The really boring work of like, have you first instrumented your customer journey so you know what's happening in there? Because oftentimes you're making bad decisions because, you haven't been as insistent with your sales reps to give you the right feedback, to give you the right like cold call sentiment and disposition, or the meeting complete data. So like, do we have a meeting show problem, or do we have a meeting book problem? And often people are just operating without knowing that. They're like, I don't know. And like, I don't really have anybody to solve it. It's like, okay, well, go spend the money on a good data science person or a good RevOps person and get that information. And so even when we were 3 or 4 million in ARR, I hired a very senior RevOps leader who's still my VP of RevOps today. Steve and I have worked together for almost a decade, but we were like making these investments early. So it's like, one, understand the funnel. Then two, you got to get good at problem solving. And before problem solving, it's really like problem identification. Can you look at this funnel and accurately understand where is the most volume with the worst conversion rates, and where are the places that I can get the most ROI for my effort? And so we have this I have this model, we have this mental model that we've borrowed from Annie Duke and modified a little bit. Like, so we want to look at all the possibilities to get better. We want to look at the probability that those possibilities actually work. We want to know the payoff if those things work, and we want to know the perspiration. And so, if you look at your funnel and you try to avoid incrementality, like I really want to, if I have all the data, then I should be able to know like where are the biggest areas of leverage. We just had our MBR yesterday, and this was like my feedback in the MBR actually. Okay, what are the biggest areas of leverage? Ignore all the like month to month noise. Like, I get this is affected, or I get that's affected things. But like, what are the one or two things that if we go fix, drastically move us forward? And then you have to be maniacal about your project management execution. And I'm personally not very good at this. I need people around me. And so I have a great enablement leader. I have a great RevOps leader. We have an awesome data team and other people in the organization who are much better at like the project execution. This comes back to this humility point. Like, I'm good at seeing the answer and getting to root cause, and I'm creative when it comes to problem solving, but I don't like to manage the project in Asana or Notion. And so, and you just need to run this process every month. Do we have the data first? Because you're always working on data foundations. Do we have the data first? Can we identify the problems? Can we understand our highest impact, so payoff, highest probability, problems to go solve? And can then you rally the resources around that thing to solve? And this is actually something I haven't talked a lot about publicly, so we can get into, but one of the big things that you can do to unlock pace, speed, and growth in your company is change management. You can get really good at change management, so that you're not overwhelming your team with chaos. Then you can get better faster than your competitors, and that is like a compounding advantage over time. And we've spent a lot of time on trying to do that right.
Hate to do this to you, but what's the 5-second takeaway on how to get better at change management?
I'm going to sound like a broken record because it's going to be my answer to a lot of things. Like, you got to have a structure and a process. Like, you have to be able to have a playbook for how you want to deploy things. So we've got this traffic light model that I've actually published on my Substack. I talked about it at my SaaS talk in 2024, but we've got a methodology. So there's green, yellow, and red light changes. Green light changes are easy. Just like push out a note in Slack, tell your reps, there's some minor modification. A red light change is like, hey, we're changing pricing. So now, and there's expectations. There's mandatory work ramp trainings. So like video enablement trainings with a certification, and it's a Slack announcement, and we're doing a video to pair with it, and we're doing reinforcement, and there's got to be usually there's a tiger team associated with it. So there's an every other week meeting where you review the impact of those changes and you're tweaking and modifying, but that's all spelled out in the traffic light model, and then we bake it into the operating system. This is another thing that I think is important, but in our operating system, when you have a project, so there's an enablement, or there's a project being run by a sales leader, you'll pick the sort of scope of project, and then it will auto generate at the end the enablement projects that show up in the enablement Notion project database. So there's systems that are there helping you do the work in the way that you want to do the work. And this is the systems engineering thing. I go back to James Clear a lot, the Atomic Habits author. like what are the systems and structures you could put around yourself to nudge yourself towards the things you want to do? It's like, okay, you want to make sure you're deploying change the right way with a rigorous methodology. So what is the digital environment that you surround yourself with? What are the automations and workflows that you have in place to nudge yourself towards doing the right thing?
How many tools are you guys using to understand every single, I think most listeners are probably just looking at stages of the funnel, and you go maniacally deeper than that. Like, how many tools do you use across the stack, just to give people a sense of like how data driven you really are on this?
So everything lives in Sigma. Sigma is our BI tool, and more than the tools, it's actually the people. We have an awesome data and biz ops team, and they go figure all that out. So, we use Salesforce as our CRM, then SalesLoft on top of it, which obviously logs all the emails and calls, and the sentiments and dispositions are in there. And then we use Momentum for this like AI CRM enrichment, which is one of the most important tools in our stack. Then everything gets hoovered into Snowflake basically, and we're doing the work in Sigma. I think this is probably one of the takeaways is if you're in VSaaS and if you run a high velocity environment, you probably need to have a BI tool much earlier than you otherwise would have. And you need to have a good data science team. Like our VP of data, like him and I and my VP of RevOps are tied at the hip. And he's tied at the hip with our CMO, and like it is a foundational part of our approach to business. So it's a little bit, we actually try to use fewer tools. Like I want as few tools as possible to prevent data silos and just like surface proliferation, which confuses reps. But the credit is actually more so to the people and like the MBR process, like Tom, who is the data person who runs MBR. He must spend like a week straight doing nothing but pulling data for MBR and looking for all the problem areas. And he knows how to, roll it all up and just highlight the important ones. It's more of the business process that I think lets us be this data centric than it is necessarily the system. Although I love Sigma. It's a great tool. So shout out to those guys.
So I want to talk about, you mentioned the people. So I just want to talk about that for a second. A lot of our listeners are maybe earlier stage founders thinking about bringing on their first outside AEs, SDRs. How did you think about that in the early days of Owner? And maybe circling back to that question of, domain understanding versus not, when that matters, does it matter in SMB or enterprise? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So we took maybe a slightly counterintuitive approach. And this goes back to like, you got to know the game you're playing. And we were playing a go big or go home game. We were playing the traditional venture capital backed, like power law outcome game. And we were going to spend a bunch of money to grow as fast as we could and absolutely win the market. And some people might be taking a bootstrapped approach or a, boot scaling, I think they call it now, or there's a bunch of different approaches. You can do like a one and done. And so you got to know the game you're playing and know that, these are not best practices. These are like high probability practices that work for Owner in our context, going big, having a founder who's one of his superpowers is raising money. So caveat. And so our approach was I was going to pay at the top end of the SMB market, and I was just going to go hire President's Club type performers from a bunch of adjacent companies. And, I have a unique advantage. I have a meaningful following on LinkedIn. I do a lot of this stuff. I have a lot of brand equity, especially in the Toronto sales community. And so me joining Owner was like a pretty significant validation that like, hey, this might actually be something. And so when I reached out to sales reps, I could go to a President's Club performer from like a mediocre VSaaS company that was like growing quickly at some point, maybe has slowed down but they're like a stage or two ahead of us. And I could just go pluck off like top reps from that place. And so there's companies there's companies that I've hired like 11 people from. And I feel sort of bad because it's, it's a company in the Toronto ecosystem that like clearly like that's not an awesome situation for them. But there's like these hotspots that, where we hired like one or two people from one company, and then, all of a sudden we have like 5 people from that company because they tell their friends, they're like, oh, like we can actually hit quotas here. Like, dude, like I'm making way more than my OTE, and the OTE is good. And I built like a very seller friendly environment with like high comp and friendly OTEs. And I was like every single end of month on a bunch of demos and helping the team get the job done. And so
Are you making those OTEs achievable for like, are you looking at it as the classic, hey, the sellers need to deliver 5 times, OTE or 3 times? Like, are you pulling it down so people make money and they get excited and continue to put in work?
Yeah, for sure. So we set quotas a little differently than most. So I think if you're early stage and you can get 3 to 1, great. Yeah. As you mature, if you can get to 5 to 1, not quota to OTE, because quotas are make believe. It's like actual like revenue that they've brought in, because our average OTE attainment last quarter, or like we did an analysis in the last couple of months that looked back like the last 6 months, and it was 148%. So if we give you 150K OTE, you're making 148% of that on average. And, which sometimes makes it slightly more challenging to hire because people see the OTE. They're like, oh, that's not that high. Like that's like, we're middle of the market now, but our top reps are like cleaning up and our average attainment is very high. Like 70-80% of AEs will hit their quota in any given month,
and you guys are fully inside sales focused. Like it's all dialing, all outreach. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't do any door knocking. I think door knocking is a little bit of a relic of the past, and it's working well for many companies, and that because they've built that motion. But I think if you started a VSaaS restaurant company again today, like door knocking's probably not the best route, because now we have way better data than we did before. You can target more effectively. You can run a very different environment today than you could 5 or 10 years ago.
So it sounded like with a lot of your early talent, you did target adjacent companies. So some experience in restaurants, retail, like how...
Anything blue collar.
Because like what I want to dig into is what matters about the domain expertise. Is it the objection handling? Is it just familiarity? No. What matters?
The deal size, more than anything. Can you operate at this velocity? Where I think people go wrong is you hire a mid-market rep for an SMB opportunity. Because the skills required to be great at it are very different. And so something that we realized in the last couple of quarters when we did this big hiring retro is that sales craft is actually a lot less important than we thought it was, like for people coming in, because we have a unique ability to teach the sales craft. Like you can come in as long as you're really hardworking, you're a good learner, and you're open-minded, and you're very organized and disciplined. Like, if you have a mediocre case study when you like pitch us owner, that isn't actually that correlated to results. What is way more important is are you really driven? Do you want to work hard? Do you like to learn? Do you have a passion for learning? And are you super organized? Because if you're managing like 50 opportunities in a month, unless you are good with your calendar and your follow-ups and you're a person that loves checklists, like too many things slip through the cracks, and then you end up getting outperformed by somebody who's got lesser sales craft but better organizational skills. You combine those two things, and then you got your super rep. Those are the reps that are doing like more than 2x their quota. So if I was early stage, I would say it's like deal size relevance. So if you're in restaurant tech, you can definitely hire people from prop tech or construction tech and vice versa. I think that works. We haven't seen a massive advantage having like restaurant experience. It's more about small deal experience. They have to have come from an environment that is like similar-ish in stage. So bringing people in from really big companies when you're very small, I don't think is very effective. And then you're really just hiring for the DNA, for the mindset, effort, resilience, grit, like learning aptitude, EQ, IQ, like the raw skills, and then you can teach a lot of the rest.
It's interesting you say that, because I feel like there also may be some layer of what is the, I guess, product complexity. Because I've seen in construction specifically, we've done a lot there, and sometimes if it's kind of a known product environment, that works. But I've actually frequently seen that folks who don't actually understand the workflows of a contractor or subcontractor struggle. But it may depend on the product.
It has a lot to do with the specific product and the specific buyer, whether or not you can take this approach. I think, I have some friends that run prop tech businesses, and they haven't needed prop tech background because the problem they're solving is fairly straightforward. You need business acumen, but if you're solving like marketing stuff for construction tech, you don't really need to know how a site works to know how to optimize like a landing page and a marketing follow-up, and how to answer how a remodeling company is supposed to answer the phone. Like, but if you're selling an operating system to manage a work site, the market understanding, the buyer centricity will matter more. But that should hopefully be a solution, because you're taking on a lot more complexity there. You should be selling a higher ticket solution, or else you're going to get mired in long deal cycles with low payback.
We were selling an enterprise kind of operating system solution, and one thing that made a huge difference for us is we actually created this role called industry engineer, which was basically a sales engineer that actually came from that market. So like they actually sat at our end customer, sat at the end enterprise, and implemented all the technology that they leveraged. So they knew the business and they knew the technology, and that was like a huge unlock. But yeah, if you're more on like marketing or top of funnel solutions, which I know Owner focuses most heavily on today, like it's probably less relevant.
Look, what ACVs are you guys?
We were 100K ACVs.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what are you guys, Kyle? Like 10?
Yeah. Right around there. And so we've gotten like pulled up market. Somebody hears from us about their friend and their like 15 locations, and they buy into the philosophy. They're like, yeah, I'm willing to give up some choice and flexibility in order to enlist Owner's army of experts. But it's not necessarily our focus day to day.
Yeah, and higher ACV, just for our listeners, higher ACV doesn't mean better, because my sales cycles were like 12 to 18 months and it sucked, right?
Yeah. So I've talked about this. I talked about this on my episode of GTM Now. Like one of the lessons that I think has been that I've intuitively understand, and now I have like language for it, is this idea of strategic congruence. Because, you're talking about like a solutions engineer and for a complex product, but I talk to founders, it's like, oh yeah, we want to be like the core data platform for XYZ. I'm like, oh yeah, what's your ACV? They're like 20 to 25K. It's like, dude, that's not going to work. You got to charge 4 times as much, because even if you can win deals, it's going to be so arduous to pull out like a core operating platform that the ACVs need to offset it. Or you got to like find a wedge product, and then it's got to be land and expand. You need some other go-to-market motion. And so you see this all the time, like, your product has to fit with your go-to-market strategy, and how you hire your sales leader has to be congruent with that. And then how you do pricing, how you hire reps, and how you do it, the culture you build. All of these things need to have a congruence that oftentimes you don't see. And it's what takes a lot of people like pretty badly off track, especially in this environment where there's like hundreds of podcasts you can listen to on all of these topics. And you hear stuff I say, it's like, oh, we should do what Owner did. They're killing it. No, like you have to understand, like, what is your context? Are you willing to like spend the money and get aggressive and, run this like super tight ship? And you gotta, to run my playbook, you gotta run all of the playbook. You can't pick and choose like little parts. And so the business context is so important. And oftentimes founders miss that.
So what's in this environment, you guys are focused on a market that is fragmented, the owners that are your main audience are low on time, low on margin, probably a lot of solutions. What was kind of the key to your wedge and I guess getting attention, moving people through that funnel?
It's a very good question. We solve a problem that people care about. We solve a money problem. We make customers money and people are willing to spend time to figure out how to make more money. When you call a restaurant owner and you say to them, hey, I was looking at your website, your reviews, you're really well reviewed, but you're actually getting outranked by Johnny's Pizza, who's like 4.3 and you're 4.8, and they have less reviews than you. And yet Google thinks that they're a higher priority business. There can only really be one reason. Your digital presence is broken in some way, and they lose their mind. They're like, yeah, that guy's pizza sucks. It's like cardboard. It's like the problem identification and being able to like press into that pain is the thing that gets people to pay attention. And this goes back to sort of the market fundamentals. I think in today's day and age where it's harder to get a buyer's attention, venture capital is like had this massive flight to quality. You have to solve a problem that people like really legitimately care about. This market in every way is going to be unkind to people solving a nice to have problem or the company that's like third or fourth in their category. If you're trying to join a company or put money into a company, like for me, it's all about like, are you clearly the first and maybe second best company in that category with a potential path to first? And are you solving something that people really care about? Because the market's too noisy.
I've heard a good analogy with kind of owner to toast, and it probably resonates with you. And I don't know if this is what you saw in those early discussions and interviews. It's like the Klaviyo to Shopify, right? And so like a lesson for me was there's a bunch of, I think, investors that miss in certain verticals. There's a monopoly or there's a market leader that's crushing it at the operating system level. Mm-hmm. But almost in all cases, they may be doing some stuff on like the growth customer acquisition side, but they're not doing it that well. It's not this core kind of thesis or focus because they have such a wide kind of landscape that they have to take care of. And then that's where like an owner comes in and just knocks it out of the park. And now you have kind of the front of the house and the back of house mindset in the industry. Is that what you saw coming from Shopify? Is that even a good analogy?
The better analogy would be Shopify to Lightspeed and owner to toast. Shopify solves the money problem. Shopify it's by far and away the best e-commerce platform in the world, and the gap is getting bigger by the month. I would say Owner is the same way. Like there's just every piece of data that you could possibly pull will tell you that Owner will grow your business faster than all of our direct competitors. Doesn't mean that it works for every single customer. Most of the time, it's the customer like wasn't doing something correctly, but that is the thing that people really do want to solve. And like Lightspeed as a point of sale, was like had better reporting and better like RBAC, which is basically user and permission control. There's a bunch of these operational functionalities that in my time at Shopify we never solved on point of sale. They probably have today. And yet we were crushing Lightspeed, Vend, Square was farther down market, but like all of these really established point of sale providers, we could still win deals at a really high rate because they were willing to sacrifice they were willing to sacrifice on the operational side. Like, okay, the reporting's not going to be as good here, but we're working on it. But you'll make more money because you're going to capture more customer data on every checkout. It's an integrated marketing experience. You can bring in-store, you can bring offline customers online to offline. And Shopify made it so easy. And so it's the same sort of thing. Like, Toast is for sure going to be the more operationally sophisticated platform than Owner for a long time. We got a lot of catching up to do. But, like every piece of data that we pull shows like how much, even if you just look at certain like website traffic, you move a business, a website from toast to owner, and you just see this in terms of search traffic. And then the customer will tell you, it's like, oh, we've never made more money. This is so exciting. We like have this new lease on the business. So that I would say is the analogy.
Got it. Awesome. Well, if cool with you, Kyle, maybe we'll just do, a rapid fire question each here and then, close this out. Luke, you want to, lob in with one and then I can finish up?
Yeah, for sure. If, most folks that listen to the podcast are they're probably in like a $1 to $10 million ARR range, and they're trying to get, either reignite the growth that you guys are seeing or, continue that trajectory that they already are seeing. Like if there's, maybe one or two kind of key hack or playbook or takeaway, and I know it's not that easy. I think one takeaway I already had was, it's the vitamin painkiller thing. Like you got to solve a revenue problem, a retention problem, compliance problem. But is there anything gleaming that you like look back on what's happened so far and say, like, if I just had to pick one thing out of my long list to be successful, what is it?
There's so many. Like, I don't know if this is going to sound cliched, but one of the things that we talk about the most internally is talent density. And, there's the Khosla saying, the team you build is the company you build, which is another thing we say a lot internally. And it's so true. You just like look at the caliber of people that we've been bringing into the company. And every time one of those people starts, that part of the business does this. There's this up and to the right and things get better. We hired a CFO like a couple quarters ago, and all of a sudden like that whole thing is rapidly improving. We hired this CMO, and he's like not even 60 days in, and all of a sudden all-time highs, back-to-back best days, best weeks, like everything is cooking. We hired, and we got a bunch of fun ones coming too. And you just like, there's this compounding critical mass that happens where like exceptional people want to work with other exceptional people. And you look around the room and you just look at like where people have come from and what they've accomplished. You're like, man, I want to be there. And it was this self-fulfilling prophecy sort of at one point in Owner's journey where we were growing at a good rate and there was lots to be excited about. But, did you have an extreme confidence that this was potentially going to be a generational company? That was my expectation. But then you start to just like, put all of these different people in the business, and it feels a little like a fait accompli at this point where, like if we don't build a company that's like tens of billions of dollars in market cap and is like by far the winner in this category, I will consider it a disappointment. I will be like, we had it. It was there for us. It was like, we had the right to win and we botched it. More so than like, I hope I can build a big company. I hope we can IPO one day. My expectation is actually far beyond IPO now. I feel like that is I can see that right in front of us. We can get there. Now it's really about something grander, and that's all about the people around the table, in my opinion.
Great point. Well, last question for you. What is the single most impactful way that AI has changed your role as a seller at a vertical company?
Oh, this is like a whole other 1 hour podcast. So I've talked a lot about this in a few different places. And so like, if you really want to go super deep on this, like go to my Substack. I've written a lot. There's a bunch of videos.
What's your Substack, just for the audience?
It's the revenueleadershippodcast.com, because I have a podcast and we talk tons about GTM AI. So let me answer this a little bit differently. So everybody wants to know what the best use case is. Like, what's the one place that's had the most transformation? It's not about use cases. It's about trying to change the way that people view solving problems in the business. And it's about resourcing the company and putting enough horsepower behind this initiative that it can really get going. It is about transformation, culture change management, and resourcing way more than it is about the use cases. Yeah, like Momentum crushes. We have this Avara sales simulator that's awesome. Trig is this like post-sales automation tool that absolutely rips. Datalane for data. Like we've got 7 awesome production use cases. OneMind is our sales avatar. It's like our education superhuman AI, AI SDR. But those things have been successful because we've been really committed to it. We've spent a bunch of money. We've like known that we were going to make mistakes. We've enabled everybody and made it an organizational priority that this is like an expectation, and we should be trying to think about solving a problem with AI as much as we can, more so than the specific use cases. And I have, it's almost done. I presented on this exact topic at GTM 25, and a bunch of that content I'm actually presenting at your thing next week. So I'll share tons more of the specifics if people want to go deep.
Excited for that and excited for next week.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Should be a lot of fun.
Well, Kyle, you're the man. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to hanging out in person here shortly. But thanks for being here. It means the world to us, and I know I got a ton out of it. I'm sure the listeners did too. So, all right, Kyle, appreciate it, my friend.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Just want to close out with another big shout out to Paraffin. Paraffin is really who makes this podcast possible. Paraffin offers, for those of you who don't already know, ready-to-launch financial products that help your merchants grow. So if you're a vertical software business, a vertical AI business, just know they provide embedded capital, embedded spend. They will help you drive revenue, retention, and TAM growth for your business. So absolutely check out Paraffin, and very thankful to them for their continued support in making verticals possible.
Awesome. Well, great episode, Nick. I'll see you next week, man.
All right. See you, Luke.
All right.